Here we go. Dave Johnson, Rob Woodfork, Dave Preston, George Wallace. This is the weekly get-together that we know is the DC Sports Huddle. We appreciate your time. We got a lot to talk about this week. Need to tell you, it's sponsored by MGM National Harbor. It's time to change the game at BetMGM Sports. And again, we appreciate their support. And I didn't mean to put the French accent on sports. Let me say that again, BetMGM Sports. This is what happens when you get up in a hotel room and Indianapolis at 3 a.m. You can't talk when we're taping this midday. But we do have a lot to talk about. It's what you guys were talking about yesterday. Last night, Rob Woodfork, I was talking about this morning, the retirement of Ryan Zimmerman. And just also, one thought occurred to me. It just goes to show you the minute you say you're never going to see something like this again, be careful what you're saying. I remember when Cal Ripken Jr. retired, we all thought, I think at the time, well, never going to see that again. A elite player spend his entire career with one team, go out on his own terms. Cal Ripken did. Ryan Zimmerman did. Just like one of his idols, Cal Ripken, Zimmerman, from start to finish in Washington. And it's going to be a long time, if ever, before somebody claims the term Mr. National. I think he always will be Mr. National. But I just also preface that saying by be careful what you say now, because 10 years, it might be different. But we're celebrating Ryan Zimmerman today. George Wallace, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny the kind of the similarities too between he and Cal as far as great family person, is going to live here in town, always in the community, always visible, and just a guy that you want to hang out with. I mean, he's a guy you just want to hang out with, Ryan Zimmerman. But a great story. He will always be Mr. National, the very first draft pick from this organization back in 2005. And he had always said, and you like to hear it, that it's fresh too. When he came to the end of the contract, he said, look, money's not a thing for me right now. If I want to keep playing, I want to do it. Well, I signed here. I can't see myself playing for another team and another organization. You don't hear that much. You hear guys chasing the money a lot, but Ryan Zimmerman was different. I mean, from day one, you could tell a fan favorite. And just again, because of from where he came from and what he was able to put out on the field and in the community, there won't be another Ryan Zimmerman. There won't be another Mr. National. And they should retire his number the first opportunity they get this year, because let's face it too, there may not be many exciting moments at Nationals Park this year with this team. So you want to get people in the stands, pick a day where you're going to retire Ryan Zimmerman's number, Ryan Zimmerman Day. A great career. Hats off to him. And it was great watching his entire career here in DC.
As I said this morning, there would never be enough standing ovations to give Ryan Zimmerman. So there's another excuse to give Ryan Zimmerman a standing ovation, bring him back to the ballpark, retire his number. Dave Preston, you spent a lot of hours at that ballpark.
And what's amazing about Ryan Zimmerman, we say, there may be another guy like him, but he is the first one. And it is so perfect that he came in when the Nationals came in way back when in 2005, the first ever draft pick. There was a stretch when he was probably the only reason worth going to the ballpark, when he was putting up 100 RBI seasons and they had misspelled uniform numbers. I think they had Nationals on Ryan Zimmerman on his jersey. They had an exploding sausage sandwich story that you need to do a deep dive on the internet to believe. They were a comedy of errors on the field. It took a while for this franchise, once they brought Mike Rizzo in, to get the right pieces in place. And for the longest time, Ryan Zimmerman was the only reason to go to the ballpark and see this 100-loss team play. Finally, when they got good, that's when his injury problems started. If you look at his first 8 years, they were fantastic. And you could make the case that Ryan Zimmerman's first 8 years in a Nationals uniform, playing a defensive position like third base, putting up those offensive numbers, he was on track to become a borderline, Hall of Fame possibility. The last 8 years, not so much offensively. He didn't play a lot of. I think he averaged under 100 games per season his last 8 years in the bigs, and he went from playing a defensive position to playing an offensive position. So there's that in there as well. But what a career he had, and what a guy on and off the field. You never heard anything bad about him going 80 miles in a 43, or they don't have 43 miles, but you know what I mean, going 85 in a 40. Or being a knucklehead, or getting choked, or being the choker in the dugout, or just doing ridiculous things. A class act. And I kind of feel old now, because here's a guy who was a kid when I first started covering him, and now he's done. And you just wish him the best. That I think he's probably going to have a role of some sort with this organization, whether it's on TV, with their package on Masson, or whether it's in the front office, whatever Ryan Zimmerman wants to do, he will do. Two more thoughts about Zim. Even though he was a shell of his former self offensively, he hit that home run in the World Series. He also had that broken bat single in the wild card game in the 8th inning. He doesn't get that. And that was the cinematic textbook broken bat single. And he doesn't get that. There is no 2019 World Series champion in Washington, because that was such a big hit right there. And second, he finally got a salt line open in my neighborhood in Boston. So he goes out a winner in my book.
We're going to get the favorite memories. You touched on that, but real quick, my favorite memory, if you will, it's not a memory, but it's just the Ryan Zimmerman went out strong, including contributing in the World Series with that home run, the first Nationals home run in a World Series. And also the fact that after 2020, he still wanted to come back for another season. There was no guarantee there was going to be another World Series. And obviously it went the complete opposite direction, but he didn't want to go out not being on the field. He could have tied it all up with the 2019 World Series and say, all right, won the World Series, I'm getting out of here. He wanted to come back for one more season. I think that says a lot about him. Rob?
Yeah, and the thing about Ryan Zimmerman in Washington, it's very rare that you have a player and a team that are so inextricably linked. I mean, it's almost like a symbiotic relationship in a sense, because yes, he was their first draft pick, and
It was like Ripken.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like to hit that, I mean, pun intended, out of the ballpark. I mean, that's any one of the biggest moments in Nationals history. Either he was on the field for, or he was the guy swinging the bat. The fascinating statistic that ESPN pulled last night is that his 11 walk-off home runs, not hits, home runs. Only 10 players have done that in Major League Baseball history, and one of them was the first draft pick in Nationals history. So, he was clutch, he was productive. I mean, he feels like more than a two-time All-Star to us, and got the Gold Glove in 2009, two-time Silver Slugger. I mean, just a terrific career, and quite frankly, the Nationals needed this kind of guy. I mean, they were, for all intents and purposes, that was an expansion team. And to have this guy be the one to sort of carry the torch for you throughout to this point, anyway, your history. I mean, just, you couldn't ask for anything better if you're the Nationals. And from his standpoint, and he said this in his parting remarks, he said basically it was my pleasure, because you're playing professional baseball not far from home. He's a Virginia kid, grew up down in Virginia Beach area, went to UVA. So, this is as close to playing for his hometown team as he gets. So just, you couldn't ask for a better storybook marriage than Ryan Zimmerman and the Nationals.
And real quick, last year he 14 home runs. He still was producing. So I wonder if they hadn't blown the team up, does he come back now that there's a universal DH? And you think maybe the team's in a conversation for a pennant or something? I think a lot changed in July 31st in his outlook too. Maybe not, maybe not. But you see everybody gone. Dave Preston, what did we say yesterday? Seven guys left from that 2019.
7 guys,
yeah. So
seven.
all of his friends are gone. He's like looking around, like where all my friends go. So you wonder if they hadn't blown this team up, would he have given it a shot with the universal DH to come back and play?
And I had to stop thinking about who the 7 were. I mean, Dave kind of quizzed me on that yesterday,
me too.
And I could only name like 3.
And George and I were saying yesterday, only 7, and they're the wrong 7. They're not the 7 to be. And to touch on our points, guys, you don't often have a cradle to grave player like Ryan Zimmerman, who's from the area too, as Rob mentioned, who was good and productive through the end of his career and finishes his entire stay in one city. It happens from time to time. I think Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell with the Tigers. But more often than not, you see a case for my New England people out there. Carlton Fisk, a kid who grew up in Vermont and New Hampshire, who winds up leaving the Red Sox halfway through his career, that really broke everybody's heart. There was no heartbreak in Washington with Ryan Zimmerman, and a son of the region, as Rob touched upon too, that when you saw Ryan Zimmerman at a Caps playoff game. I think one of the Stanley Cup games, cheering them on with the "Let's Go Caps" wearing the helmet. It felt genuine. You actually believed it. You actually believed he was really into the playoffs. Same with Max Scherzer too. But you really felt that, as opposed to a lot of Major League Baseball players who spend time in the area, you feel that Ryan Zimmerman, with his foundation, with everything that he and his wife have done off the field, you really feel that he is investing in the Washington area. And not only am I happy to, call him a guy that I covered all these years, but I'm really happy that he's a citizen of this Beltway.
That's a good point. And you mentioned foundation. And again, it's very Ripken-like, completing the whole career with one team and an amazing career. And Cal Ripken is very active with the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation, which honors his father and performs some of the work with the kids in a lot of areas in this area, including Prince George's County, where they're about to develop a sports complex, which will include baseball in an underserved area. And that's something that was very near and dear to Cal Ripken Senior's heart. And the Zims Foundation with Brian and Heather that is supporting MS patients and their families, that's something that really hits home with me. Having multiple sclerosis, Ryan Zimmerman's quote, as we presented Ryan and Heather Zimmerman with the Champion Award from the MS Society, that one bad day of MS is tougher than anything he will ever face in baseball. And while, fortunately, my multiple sclerosis is not that bad yet, having been a child of multiple sclerosis, my mom had it, I can attest that is true. When you can't hold your head up and you can't swallow, that is a bad day, and you probably would rather face a curveball than deal with some of those challenges that my mother dealt with. And it was something that the Zims Foundation does for families. They hold a kids camp. The purpose is to get kids that are the children of parents of multiple sclerosis a chance at normalcy for a short period of time, to forget the challenges and the problems. And again, that's something I can attest to, having grown up with a mother in a wheelchair who had that disease. So the connection between him and Ripken is similar to their not only wanting to excel as members of the team and be good teammates, but also be good citizens.
And I mean, we're all old enough, gentlemen, to the point where we're not buying jerseys at the drop of a hat. A couple of years ago, I did a piece
Speak for yourself.
and
Nah,
said,
man,
"Hey,
we too
what
old for
jersey would I buy?" Years ago, I would have bought. I had a list of 3 or 4. A Sonny Jurgensen, old school burgundy and gold George Allen era road jersey. I would have bought that one. I would have bought an old school Caps jersey, from back, in the day before they went to the Teal Eagle and stuff like that. An old Bullets jersey, Tom McMillan, of course, with the stripes. And dare I for the longest time, it's like if there were a Nationals jersey I would buy, it would be Scherzer's. But you gotta love what Ryan Zimmerman stood for as a player and as a guy in the organization. He was always the calmest voice in that clubhouse, no matter if the team was, winning 10 in a row or losing 15 straight and Matt Williams was about ready to get thrown out. He was always a very calming force. And George and I and Jonathan Warner, who was with us as well at the time, had a chance to cover the clubhouse after some of their playoff wins. And we don't outwardly root for these guys. We're not fanboys, but there was something really cool seeing the joy in Ryan Zimmerman's face when they won that wild card game. And George, I know that you were in there after the World Series to see to be a witness to just the happiness that these guys felt, even though happiness in sports is fleeting. It's the next day, it's the next season. But it's nice that Ryan Zimmerman got to climb the mountaintop once, because so many guys who play this game don't get a chance to be a champion. And so many regions, Washington for the longest time didn't have a champion in one of the 4 major sports. Obviously, DC United, the Castles, they do great, Spirit as well. But for the longest time, there was a drought in this area of the 4 major sports that everyone talks about. And so it's so nice to see Ryan Zimmerman leave on his own terms and leave a champion forever.
And no, it's not germane to the conversation, but the 4 major sports bit, I'm going to put a stop to that right now. When you're Major League Soccer, now I'm not kidding anymore. When you're Major League Soccer and you average over 21,000 a game, and you've been around for 28 years now, or 27 years, and you're building $500 million stadiums, you tell me that's not a major sport? The statement that there are only 4 major sports in this country has to stop. It's like saying we can only have a certain number of this because that's the way it was in 1935. If we did everything like we did in 1935, there wouldn't be a sports huddle because we wouldn't have the technology.
I mean,
There are not
you wouldn't have a
four
sports
Get to
huddle,
sleep
'cause I wouldn't
in.
be allowed on it.
No, there's five major sports. There's five major sports at least, and you look at any metric. The four major is ridiculous. I'm sorry, but I gotta. That does drive me nuts, and people will laugh at me. But get me in the debate. Show me the metrics.
No, what's funny? No, I was laughing because I knew you were going to say that. As soon as he said that, I was like, "Oh, here comes Dave. Here comes Dave.
Well,
Dave's
no,
coming
but
off the
it's-
top
but-
rope."
But if you're an owner of a team that just built a $400 million stadium that's helping to renovate Southeast DC or Southwest DC, that whole area down there, and you put $400 million, that's a lot of money. Do any of us have $400 million? No. If you do that and then somebody doesn't call you a major sport and lumps you in with the Castles, with all due respect, a team that's not even around anymore, that's not correct.
Five-time champion. No, hey,
Five-time champion that's not
praise,
around anymore. It's not
yeah.
around anymore. That didn't build a $500 million stadium. So this stuff where you lump them together, that's incorrect.
okay. Well, I come to praise Ryan Zimmerman, not to bury Major League Soccer, gentlemen.
I was going to say,
actually, to that point about the Ryan Zimmerman, though, we've been very fortunate. As much as we complain about not getting championships and stuff like that in DC, and I mean, obviously, we've had some of that success here in recent years, but I mean, we've been very blessed to have guys who've had those long careers with one team. You look at a Ryan Zimmerman, you look at a Alex Ovechkin, and I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but Darryl Green played here for 20 years. He's one of only 3 players in NFL history to do that, play with one team for 20 years. So, I mean, we've been very fortunate, almost concurrently, to have some great players stay for a long while and be inextricably linked to those teams.
and what, you could throw Max in there too. Max for 7 years, Scherzer, 7 years. One other thing about, to Dave's point about Zimmerman in that clubhouse, he was also a guy that got it. He was a guy, he knew that regardless wins or losses, he's the face. He knew that he had to talk to the media. Like, he got it. He understood it. Some guys would go and hide, but Zim gets it. Some teams going through a slump, going through a winning streak, he's going to stand in front of his locker and talk because he understood his obligation to, I mean, like I said, a lot of guys run away and hide from it, but he understood his obligation as being the guy, the face of the franchise that media and the fans want to hear from. That was another part of him that he understood, and that went a long way, I think, as far as the media, especially when Dave showed up wearing his jersey in the clubhouse that time. That was,
Hey, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. And along the lines of the Nationals, we mentioned only 7 guys left. It's amazing that the Nats won their championship after the Capitals, yet the Capitals nucleus is still there for the most part. And Ryan Zimmerman is technically older than Alex Ovechkin, but baseball years and hockey years, there's somewhat of a calibration there where, a 36-year-old hockey player is the equivalent, I think, maybe to a 42 or 43-year-old baseball player. And the fact that Ovi, setting, 30 goals, just a tangent off that, it's amazing that these guys came in together. Ovechkin's still skating despite being in a more physically demanding sport. And the Capitals are still, even though they're on the fringes of the playoff race right now, they're still a team that's built to win, while the Nationals, who won more recently, are in a complete revamp at this moment.
All right, I think Ryan Zimmerman, again, it's just a wonderful combination of somebody not only competes on the field, but is, as I said, a champion off the field in so many ways. And we're so excited that, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to Palm Springs to retire. This is still going to be their community, and no doubt they'll still be involved. Quickly, you want to put any final thoughts on the Super Bowl? Because only 3 points separated those two teams.
Yeah.
What a playoff, guys. What a playoff. Outside of Super Wildcard weekend, which was as bloated as the day after Christmas when you've had ham and scalloped potatoes beyond belief. Every game decided by single digits, 1 possession games, everything went down to the wire. It felt like an NCAA tournament, but where there are no 1 versus 16 games. Every game was decided in the last few minutes. And despite what football does, I've got issues with what they do with Thursday night games, with guys on minimal rest, the 17, eventually an 18-game season, playing your championship in mid-February when late January was just fine 20 years ago, the 9:30 a.m. games in London. But you know what? When you've got great product, people will, you can't turn away. And again, it's one of the most watched, the most watched program, the entire year. And, I'll take my hat off to the NFL. What bothers me is that you'll turn on sports radio, guys, and they'll be like, what am I going to do now that there's no football? Oh, we got no games for 8 months. There's a lot of sports out there from, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Soccer, college hoops, college lacrosse. Read a book, go outside, take a walk. But, football was what a great season it was, guys. What a great playoff and what a great Super Bowl.
Yeah. And also in my column I wrote on WTOP.com, just what this Super Bowl sort of proved is that you can go all in on a championship and come out on top. A lot of times we associate the, all in attitude with, the 2000 Washington team that, the Fortune 500 team that went 8-8, even though they went out and spent on a bunch of free agents. You think about the dream team, Eagles in 2011 that also finished 8-8, even though people had Super Bowl aspirations for them because they got a bunch of big names. Not only did the Rams get big names, A, most of them were homegrown, and B, the guys that they did get were a good fit for what it was that they were doing. So I think it shows that there's more than one way to get to a Super Bowl. And I did sort of draw the parallel to what Washington is doing right now. Now is the time to go all in for a quarterback, because you look at their roster. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. Their offensive line is not a liability like the Bengals. I mean, they're not going to get a quarterback killed anyway, like the Bengals are. So I think you look at kind of where they are as a franchise. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the ownership suite, but I think the Washington Spirit just proved that can be overcome. So if Washington can get their hands on one of these top tier quarterbacks and sort of maximize this window of having some really good productive players on rookie contracts, they could make that leap like the Bengals did.
Make a great point, because the offensive line is arguably the most important line of the two lines, arguably, I say. But to the Bengals in that Super Bowl, they held up as long as their offensive line held up. And when all those sacks started to come in the second half, that turned out to be the difference in the game. So in some ways, it was a credit to the Bengals offensive line that they held up that long against that Rams defensive line, which I thought was going to get to Joe Burrow from the start. But it just proves you cannot get sacked 9 or 10 times. Or would he get sacked 7 times, I guess, but it felt like 9.
Super Bowl record, though. So
Super Bowl, yes. With Roger Staubach was the only other one. But to the other point is, it also shows that it has to be the right fit and opportunity. Clearly, there was some chemistry with Matthew Stafford, and he wanted to go to that place, the Rams specifically, and it fit. And it was the right collection of players that they brought in. You can't just do this on paper. You can have the money, but we've seen it in every sport. You bring them together, and your great plans at a Super Bowl or an NBA title or whatever it is, all ends up as just a bad investment. It was a different story in Los Angeles. Well,
one more takeaway, guys. Sean McVay, years ago, he went to the Mortons and Reston, was looking for a Pinot Noir. His server got him in touch with a Ponzi Pinot Noir. Since then, Sean McVay has been living the best life on and off the field. His career has skyrocketed, all thanks to somebody who recommended a Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. We'll leave that person nameless.
Oh, wow. So then you're going to be the next head coach in the NFL, because anybody who's been within arm's length of him ends up getting a head coaching job. So I've got a call after for the New York Giants. Yeah, I was about to say, congratulations in advance for the New York Giants gig that will obviously be open in 2 years. But hey, we got to get to the Porzingis trade, my man. Yeah. We can't go without talking about that.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. Look, the Wizards talk about chemistry and fit and opportunity. It wasn't working. It shows on paper. You try something. The record said it wasn't working. It should have. As I said, it was not a team that was going to win 10 of every 13 games. But at the time the trade was made, they had lost 8 of 10. They should have been better than a 2-8 team at that point. So all you can do is listen closely to the comments of players now that it was not working from a chemistry standpoint, and that was translating on the court. And now we'll see what it is going forward. And the key, like always in the NBA, where there's only 5 players on the court at a time, if you lose a key player, it really has an impact. If Kristaps Porzingis, though, can stay healthy, he is a player that can have an impact. And quite frankly, in that trade, you shed a contract Davis Bertans that was looking way overpaid because he couldn't make a shot.
Yeah, the Porzingis deal. Look, I was more excited about that than I think most people are. Most people are like, "Why would you do that? He's hurt all the time." And to be fair, it does smell. I'm old enough to remember the Mark Price trade, and I mean that was a bona fide star player with the Cavaliers, and he barely played. He barely played with the Bullets. But
let me just add to that before you go on about Mark Price.
Yeah,
we didn't know what plantar fasciitis was until that happened.
Yeah.
And this was before Google. And you talk about a real challenge. I can still remember calling a foot doctor trying to get a hold on this. You couldn't just Google plantar fasciitis. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like I was a kid when that happened, so I don't even remember the ins and outs of it quite that well.
You didn't have to say that.
Yeah, but Porzingis, man, look, if he's healthy, then I mean, I'm not going to say that you have a big 3, but if you're a Wizards fan, you have to be excited about the prospect of having Bradley Beal, Porzingis healthy, and Kyle Kuzma. I mean, that's not a bad trio of guys to have if you can fit the right pieces in place around them. So I know it's a big if, but if Porzingis is healthy, that's a special player that could transform your franchise, and that's the kind of luck the Wizards are gonna have if they're going to make that leap up into the upper echelon of the of the Eastern Conference and of the NBA. So I'm a fan of the move.
As GM Tommy Shepard said, don't be afraid of big swings, which is what Jerry West told him. And it's a big swing, Dave.
Now, I think that last week we said that they've got to thin the herd in some way, shape, or form because there were 11, 12 guys expecting minutes. They need to trim the fat, so to speak. Little did we know that Bradley Beal was going to be done, in that stretch as well. But I think you look at, they got rid of 4 players. They brought in 3. They got a draft pick, some cash considerations. The upside Porzingis, if he produces, that is huge. And as we met, you get a home run for that. So many teams go into the trading deadline looking to get singles and or doubles. And I think you got to give Tommy Shepard some props. You win you can't constantly be up there free swinging like Steve Balboni, but you have to be selective, more like Ryan Zimmerman. When there's a chance, you have a chance to walk it off. And who knows if this is going to be a walk-off deal or if it's even going to be a ground rule double. But I think that they had to do something, and they got rid of the right players in this mix, the right contracts, and they kept, by keeping Kuzma. That's obviously a huge thing. And hopefully, fingers crossed, guys will come back healthy next fall. And in between now and then, they'll win some games and they'll continue to develop the younger guys.
Again, when I'm talking about chemistry, that's not to try to indict anybody that left as being a bad guy. That's not the case. It's just like think about your own workplace. It can be a good person, but for whatever reason, it's not the fit with how your team works.
And relationships. I mean, how many relationships have you been in where, it just didn't work out and it wasn't any one person's fault. It's just a bad mix.
No, correct. And
it's like vanilla extract. Does anybody say I'm going to have dessert tonight because of the vanilla extract? No, but it's a part of the cake in some way, shape, or form. A little bit of cinnamon. Sometimes you put too much cinnamon. Sometimes you put in too much sugar. It's every roster, and even though the NBA, it's just 12 to 15 guys, it's 12 to 15 guys that are together nonstop for 9 months. You really need to get the right recipe, and it's not, as we mentioned, it's not saying that bad guys have left the organization. It's just that the right mix of the ingredients wasn't there long term.
Yeah, no, you look at the record where they were, and it clearly wasn't working. And so when you have a chance, and they didn't just throw away players for nothing. Again, the Kristaps Porzingis, if he stays healthy, and you hope it's not as big an if, but look, I'll give you a classic example of how you can never predict, and we'll end on this, predict the future of health of a player. And this is no fault to Michael Jordan, but I remember at the time, Michael Jordan thought Rip Hamilton is too, he looked like about 185 pounds dripping wet. He thought, well, he's too fragile. He's probably not going to make. make it long-term in the NBA. And it was hard to argue with that. I mean, the way the fouls and et cetera, et cetera. Well, Rip Hamilton did survive and did just fine. So, and again, that's not a criticism of Michael Jordan. It's just that you cannot predict the future. A player can be injured all the time and suddenly he's healthy for 10 years and wins a title or something like that. So,
yeah, didn't Frank Gore tear an ACL in college and then he ends up having that ridiculously long career in the NFL? So, yeah. I mean, to that point, yeah.
Gentlemen, before we go, I know that it's NBA All-Star Weekend coming up, something of local interest. Howard is going to be playing Morgan State at the All-Star site this Saturday. I was planning on covering the game when I first thought it was at Burr Gymnasium. It's not, it's in Cleveland, so I will not be going there. Or if I would, it'd be rather ridiculous. But this is the first time they've done this, honoring two HBCUs, playing, the same weekend as the All-Star game. So the Bison are having a great year. They've won 5 straight. They have a chance to have a winning record for the first time in 20 years. Great job by Kenny Blakeney, in it with the Bison. So, and Morgan State is no slouch either. So it should be a good game on the big stage this Saturday at 4 or 2. I won't be driving there because it's in Cleveland, but a great chance to see some good basketball.
It's not a bad drive.
Tom, yeah.
I've done it before.
No.
Time is about up. Thank you for spending some time with us on the DC Sports Huddle, sponsored by our good friends at MGM National Harbor. It's time to change the game at BetMGM Sports. We'll see you next week.
Break.